I'm Jacob Santrop.
I'm Trevor Hudson.
I'm Jackson Banks.
I'm Malcolm Palmer, and our topic is capital punishment, and we are now open for questions.
What is capital punishment?
Capital punishment is the legally authorized killing of someone as punishment for a crime.
Are you prepared to talk about capital punishment in the United States only, or how it is carried out in other countries as well?
In the United States.
Yes, United States.
Does every state have capital punishment?
No.
Could you elaborate?
Only 30 states have capital punishment as of today. States that don't enforce, you want me to list those states?
Go right ahead.
Washington, Alaska, New Mexico, North Dakota, Minnesota, Iowa, Michigan, Illinois, Wisconsin, West Virginia, Maryland, New York, Vermont, Maine, Massachusetts, Rhode Island, Connecticut, Hawaii, New Jersey, and Delaware. Don't have the death penalty.
Why not?
They have, some feel that it violates the Eighth Amendment of cruel and unusual punishment, and think that it's not the state's right to take the life of its citizens.
Even in the states where it is legal, how often are we seeing people executed, do you know?
In 2018, 20 people have been executed. 2017, 23 people have. In 2016, 20 people.
And that's nationwide.
Nationwide.
So even in the 30 states that have it, we're seeing less than one per state on average.
Yeah.
Do you have any idea of how many people are on death row that are working towards potential execution?
Currently,
On death row right now, there's 2,742 people on death row.
Any idea why it takes, we've got so many people on death row, why are there not more being executed each year?
Because the process, like the cases, it can take years.
People can
people
appeal.
can fight it just the whole time you're on death row.
Do you think that that's a good thing in those states where it's legal to have the process take years, or?
no.
No, because it just takes up so much money of the
Yeah.
taxpayers' money.
It's
It costs
extremely
money.
expensive. It's just constantly have people appeal.
What about the cases where they're wrongly accused, we find out years later, sometimes decades later, through DNA testing or, reopening the investigation, we find out that an innocent person has either been on death row for an extended period of time, or they've been put to death unjustly.
How often does that happen?
No, I'm asking your opinion on that, because you just stated that you feel that the appeals, there should not be as many appeals as there currently are if you're on death row, but what about for that 1 out of X that's actually innocent?
Well, that's what I feel.
Well,
We should-
yeah, I think that's,
Yeah.
you just go to the root of the problem and get rid of capital punishment entirely.
Ah, okay.
Is that your position, Malcolm?
Yeah, that's all of our positions.
Okay, so since it's all of your positions, could you, each one of you tell me why you believe that?
Well, when this first started, I was for it, but when I looked at all the facts, I saw that it really wasn't worth it because crime rates don't go down with the death penalty. So I kind of switched my my side on it.
Yeah, I think that it's extremely expensive. I mean, it costs more to, or it doesn't cost as much to hold someone for 40 years at highest level security in Texas, or it's 3 times the cost, I'm sorry. And I think there's a lot of disparity or red tape when it comes to cruel and unusual punishment.
Those are 2 separate things. Which one is it, disparity or red tape?
Oh, red tape, I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. I mean, you can make good arguments either way. I was
Yeah.
just curious which one.
I just think that people try to define it, and I think it's difficult to define. So,
Has the Supreme Court found that the death penalty is per se cruel and unusual?
no, well, no.
Right
Yeah.
answer. Okay, so Trevor, why are you against the death penalty?
At first I was for it, but then I started looking into it, and the prices of it is just way too much. It's not very efficient, and I think putting someone in maximum security for the rest of their lives would be sufficient justice for the people.
I don't think the state is an appropriate authority to determine whether somebody lives or dies, and also I don't think the families of either the defendant or whatever, they don't get a lot of, closure from them.
The families of the victims?
Yeah.
What about Pittsburgh? You know, what most recently happened where that young guy walked in, killed, what, 12 people, many of them, one lady 97. What about that? Do crimes like that, where are you with a heinous crime like that in the death penalty?
It's easy to have a jerk reaction of like, that was terrible, he should not live, because what he did was terrible. I agree, but when it comes to a court ruling that somebody should die, you need to step back and think logically, not out of reaction and pure like emotion in the moment. You need to think logically and protect rights.
I
Who's
think,
The guy who got shot.
Yeah, so did he seem to care about his victims' rights?
It was equivalent justice being served. If you care to define justice, that would be nice.
Well, I'm gonna get into the Bible if you're okay with that.
Sure.
The Bible, so some people point towards saying eye for an eye, life for a life when you read the Bible. So that's where a lot of that part of the government comes out of, when somebody kills somebody, that they should also be killed. But that was in reference to sin, and God is the ultimate judge of sin, and I don't think he gave humans the authority to determine that.
Are you familiar with what the Bible says about governments, though?
Yes.
Can you tell me what that
Be
is?
more specific on that. Use scripture, please.
So, the verse Exodus 21, 23, 24 says, whether you take life for a life, eye for eye, and so on and so forth. Also in Genesis 9:6, whoever sheds human blood, by humans shall their blood be shed, for an image of God, as God made mankind.
What about the New Testament?
New Testament, I don't have any verses from the New Testament, but in the Old Testament, you were prescribed the death penalty for murder, but also cursing a parent, false prophecy. So the Old Testament prescribes the same punishment for murders as it does cursing a parent. Raises the question if the Old Testament is still like a credible source to judge somebody's actions that way. And also in Bible class this year, we are discussing whether the Bible is not necessarily written to us, but it's written like for us to read, but it's not to our people group, our world today.
So one of the 10 Commandments is thou shalt not kill. Does that mean we shouldn't kill people, or people, you know, if someone kills someone, we shouldn't kill the killer? What's your interpretation of that? You know, maybe that 10th commandment, one of the 10 Commandments, thou shalt not kill. And how apply that to, you know, your thoughts on that related to capital punishment.
I think killing someone is perfectly justifiable in terms of war, because like David, he killed many people in war. So I think you can make the argument that capital punishment is justifiable through the Bible.
Can I, if you don't mind, I have something from the New Testament I'd like to read for you. I just wanted to see what your opinions are on this, and maybe you overlooked this in your research. So this is in Romans 13. Do you know who wrote Romans?
Paul.
Apostle Paul. Right. Okay. So let me just read. It's lengthy. I apologize, but try to catch all of this. Okay. So he says in Romans 13, this is 1 through 5 or 6. He says, "Let every person be subject to the governing authorities, for there is no authority except from God, and those that exist have been instituted by God. Therefore, whoever resists the authorities resists what God has appointed, and those who resist will incur judgment. For rulers are not a terror to good conduct, but to bad. Would you have no fear of the one who is in authority? Then do what is good, and you will receive his approval. For he is God's servant for your good. That's talking about the government. But if you do wrong, be afraid, for he, the government, does not bear the sword in vain. What do you use the sword for?
Killing.
Yep. For he is a servant of God, an avenger who carries out God's wrath on the wrongdoer. Therefore, one must be in subjugation not only to God's wrath, but also for the sake of conscience. What are your thoughts on that?
That, I kind of feel like the Bible doesn't say either 100% yes or 100% no on it. I don't think that it has a super definable answer, because even our Bible teachers disagree on it. They all have differing views. Like Mr. Siemens is against capital punishment, Mr. Jameson and Mr. Gifford are, but Mr. Reddish is for it, and they both have their own unique reasons for their response. So I think we can look to the Bible to help find an answer, but I don't think there is a yes or no answer in the Bible.
You all stated that collectively you're against the death penalty here in the U.S. For citizens of the United States. What about in circumstances where, terrorism has become, so much more in the spotlight as far as religious extremists who they do not believe in Christianity and they want us dead because of our beliefs as Christians. So we capture these folks, we detain them. What are your feelings there on capital punishment? They're saying they want us all to die. They don't believe in God. They don't believe in Christianity. So do we continue to detain them, or are you in favor of the death penalty for these extremists?
I'd say that's kind of different, don't you think? Like, we're talking about people that are civilians in the United States, and that's kind of like more of a military issue. What do you think?
I don't disagree that maybe it is more of a military issue, but it's still a human life. So I'm just kind of curious. So you guys made a pretty profound statement that you're against capital punishment, but is it selective capital punishment? So if I'm a civilian, you won't put me to death, but if I'm a militant or if I'm a combatant, you might be more inclined to put me to death.
I don't think it should be put to death. I think it should across the board in capital punishment.
Okay. There's not a right or wrong answer. I'm just looking for your thoughts and your opinions.
So I would say to the terrorists, I would say shoot them. I'm only against capital punishment because economically it's not very effective. It just costs way too much. So I would be for it if there was a way to make it be cheaper and to guarantee that the person that you're putting to death is guilty of what they did.
Can I ask a follow-up question on that? From a cost perspective, what is your understanding of the reason that the cost is so high for capital punishment? Is it, the injection that they use is a really expensive medicine that they have to concoct, or is it the legal process that they have to go through, or where do the costs come in?
It's the legal process through the person appealing over and over and over. That just adds up. Paying the judges, paying the lawyers, and just all of the man hours that go into it. You got to pay for all that.
But like you said, if you could find a way to make that more cost-effective, in the sense of reducing the number of appeals or something like that, that you may be in favor of it, just from a monetary perspective. If it was cheaper, if you were convicted, you had no right of appeal, and we took you out back and shot you, we'd be okay with that.
I want to say you shouldn't be allowed to appeal. I'd say there should be a limit. You shouldn't be able to do that your whole life just to be able to get out of it.
How many appeals do you get? So I've been convicted. You guys are the judges. You just convicted me to death. How long is that process for me typically, and how many appeals do I get throughout the process?
I think it depends on the state, how many appeals you're allowed to have. I think Texas and Oklahoma are more strict on appeals because they execute the most than any other state. Yeah, but I think for some states it's unlimited. You can appeal as many times as you want.
Let me ask another question if I can on, if we don't have capital punishment, if we then we could keep these people in prison for their lives, correct? Or are you guys advocating for, if somebody murders someone, they should get out of prison after a shorter period of time? So you think they should stay in prison for life? Is that where you think you're at?
Yeah, depending on the sentence, if it's 25 years, yeah.
So let's say, like for murder, let's just go with that one for now. So if somebody murders someone else, the typical sentence is life in prison, or perhaps the death penalty if you're in one of the 30 states, right? So if we completely outlaw the death penalty and you then have life in prison for all these people, what societal benefit is there to keeping people in prison for their whole lives? Like as a society, how do we benefit from that?
You save some of your tax money that would have gone to
Okay.
the whole process of putting someone there.
But if we can make it cheaper, is there any other benefit? If we can make it cheaper, because I submit, granted I'm not a government official, I can probably find a cheaper way to do it. And I am a lawyer, so I can probably come up with some ways to cut down on the legal process. But even if I cut that down so it's 10 times more expensive to keep someone in prison than it is to execute them, is there a societal benefit in keeping people in prison?
I don't think so, because it's proven that the death penalty does not lower crime rate, so.
But if I'm in jail, can I commit crimes outside?
Well, if you're in solitary confinement for the rest of your life, that'd be pretty tough.
I don't know, do I have to be in solitary
I
to
would
not
say,
commit crime?
You could be, like Colorado has a maximum security prison, and its inmates spend 23 hours a day in their cells and are escorted by a minimum of 3 officers for 5 hours of private recreation a week. And it's not solitary confinement, but it's maximum security.
And I guess that's where I think this kind of illustrates my point with it is, it seems to me like in those situations, you've taken away their lives anyway. Right? If I'm in a prison cell for 23 hours a day for the rest of my life, arguably you've pretty much taken away my life. Where doesn't it make more sense to just end my life? Because you're not allowing me to do what I really want to do. I have to be in solitary confinement for 50 years. So how is there a benefit to not executing that person? You see where I'm getting at? That's
Yeah.
where I'm kind of having the struggle in my head is, what is the difference of executing someone versus sentencing them to life in prison in this maximum security type of situation?
Oh, I don't think that every person convicted of murder should go to the maximum security prison. Like the thing in Pittsburgh, someone like that, obviously, it was like premeditated. It was, it was awful. But if someone, not to make light of murder, but if it was like a robbery gone wrong, and the person didn't even realize that they were going to kill someone that night, I don't think that they should have their entire life taken away.
But you would be okay in that situation with that guy sitting in prison for the rest of his life? Whether it's maximum security or not, basically his life's taken away, right?
Yeah.
He doesn't get to go out and do fun stuff.
I would say, from a spiritual perspective, that they should probably be thanking you, because that person is most likely going to go to hell, and most likely is not going to be a Christian. So just putting them on death row and killing them, they would be going to hell sooner. So if you keep them in jail longer, then they don't have to go to jail as early, I guess. I don't know. You can look at it that way.
And maybe they have a chance for some sort of repentance or something like that?
We're reading a book called How Now Shall We Live in our Bible class, and it's about Chuck Colson. And when he went to prison, he started a foundation to help inmates find Christ and whatnot. So, and that's not the only organization. So if there's organizations like that allowing prisoners to find a second chance, it gives people a reason to not want to execute them.
This is probably outside of the scope of your research, but as far as prison and prison systems, that kind of calls into question the purpose of the prison. Is the purpose of a prison to reform people, put them back on the straight and narrow, so to speak? And do you have any statistics or information on those types of programs and if they actually work?
Earlier, in history